You can feel the giddiness because this is the last event of Research Week 2025. My name is Christine Brennan. I am very lucky to be the manager of the Research Strategy Policy team. And we seconded in a couple of extra members, including Sean Ryan and Ger Downs from the Doctoral College and Research Support Services to help run Research Week. So I'm very lucky because I just get to show up and enjoy it. And the team have put on an amazing programme this week. The energy has been phenomenal, and I think we're very, very happy with how the week has run. So a couple of housekeeping just before we get started to remind you all to turn off your phones and, as they say, be present in the moment. And the second thing is to tell everybody that we are recording. We're doing video and photography, and if you don't want to be part of that, just let the team know. But equally, just be conscious of that. We're very keen to capture this talk and to make sure it has a life outside of this room. The last thing I need to say, so in our first talk this morning, we did the formal thank yous, and there's one big thank you I have to make. And it's testament to this lady that all of the colleagues ran up to me afterwards and said she thanked everybody, but who's going to thank her? So I would just like to thank from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of the whole team to Yvonne Kiley for making Research Week happen. And I will conclude on this note, and it is to quote Yvonne herself: "To be here is a privilege. To be part of the stories of all the research community in UL is a privilege." I'll hand over to Martin Cunningham. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. It's a gorgeous period of weather that we're having, and it's a Friday, and it's a bank holiday weekend, so we do appreciate you turning up. It's an honour for me to actually be here today and to share the information about the XTREME project. I want to kind of build upon what you were saying. It's a story. I think research is a story that's important, that needs to be told. And I want to kind of tell you my story and the story of this journey of winning this funding. So the most important thing with XTREME is that it's a huge European project. And it's a very unusual project. And I'm going to explain how unique and unusual it is shortly. And the interesting thing is that we have a world premiere today. We're going to share with you one of our first productions from the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance, which no one else has seen. So this is a huge honour for us. And I'm excited to see what you think of that. But winning research funding, and I suppose applying for research funding, is now a normal part of academic life, of academic research. And we're very lucky in Ireland to be part of the European Union and to have access to Horizon Europe. And I can't emphasize enough to people that Horizon Europe is such an opportunity for all academic researchers at all levels to pursue this funding. Horizon Europe is very unique because it's not just about the science. It's about the social impact of the science. And this is a very kind of important aspect to EU funding. And the EU and Horizon Europe actually is perhaps the most positive social-facing research funding globally. And what it means is that researchers can pursue funding in all manner of different contexts, all manner of different kind of research opportunities. And even if it's on AI, Horizon Europe have emphasized that research funding is also about social aspects. So it's about AI ethics, it's about AI governance, it's about understanding how human values, European values, are also embedded into these research consortiums and proposals. So with XTREME, when I came to UL almost 10 years ago, trying to resolve an itch I had, and that was to become an academic. You know, I wanted to be a researcher. I wanted to do good research. I wanted to do socially valuable research. But the thing is, to do socially valuable research, especially when you're an early career academic, you need money. you have to go out and get the money. You have to pursue the funding. So in 2022, I had a really brave plan that I was going to apply for funding as much as I could. And I worked really hard that year, and I had 5 funding proposals submitted. And I was the lead on 3 of them. And all I wanted was for one to win. And luckily one did, and that was the XTREME project. And fortunately, it was the biggest win, because it meant that UL had access to €1 million in funding. So it wasn't just, so with research funding, it's not just given to you, it's a journey. It's a long journey. It's a journey where you're confronting constant rejection, but you stick to it and eventually you get a win. And I think that's the important message I have, that research is a journey. It's a journey of collaboration with people, but eventually, hopefully, you get a win. And what that win means is that you get funding to actually pay people to do research, important research, and to collaborate, and to think of new ideas, innovative ideas. So what XTREME really meant to me was that it was a journey. It started with XTREME 1.0 in 2022. That submission was unsuccessful. It didn't even score that well. But from that disappointment, we created a more ambitious plan. We responded to the feedback. We looked at what we got wrong, and we addressed it. And we created then a slight change in name. We created XTREME 2.0. And we did change the consortium. We got new people in. We changed the focus. We changed the ambition. And one of the key things, actually, is that the lead is ITU Copenhagen. And in Copenhagen, they had access to a grant, a support grant, to help develop the proposal. So the consultant that came in to help us develop the proposal in 2023 said, look, this is really about human-centric innovation. And we need to support the AI, the mixed reality aspect in terms of ethics and governance. And my idea in response to that was that let's create a living lab. And let's base this living lab in the University of Limerick. And that living lab essentially would enable a multitude of diverse voices to come in and inform and participate in the research. And that's what we've been doing, is building this living lab over the last year, and now we're starting to work with it. Now we're starting to really build up and ramp up the ambition and the strategy of the living lab. So we're a year and a couple of months into XTREME. It's a very unique project. I can't see many projects ever getting funded like this one again. It's so unique. And one of the unique characteristics of it is that XTREME is all about creating a new immersive environment for the experience of culture and art. And this is a very kind of ambitious and innovative plan. So when we first developed the project, we were thinking, well, one of the key benefits of this kind of technology is that it promotes greater inclusion. It allows people that can't attend cultural and artistic events to experience the next best thing, right? You're never going to do better than being there at a concert in person in the real world, right? That's fantastic. But some people won't have that opportunity for whatever reason, for many reasons, right? So this research is trying to address that and to create a new innovation that provides the next best thing. And that next best thing is an immersive, higher fidelity, high quality environment, a digital environment. So the headset here in front of the panel, this is the Apple Vision Pro headset. And essentially what we're doing is we're going to use the Apple Vision Pro, and we're going to create new environments, new immersive experiences in this headset that people put on the headset, and they have access then to free productions that we'll be doing. So XTREME is an €8 million funded project. This is a huge amount of money to do this research. It's across Europe. The University of Limerick has a massive role in this project. And what we're doing is we're bringing together, I suppose, three worlds. the hard science of AI and technical innovation, creative partners and creative innovation and artists, and also then AI ethics and technology ethics and governance. So all those three come together and merge and fuse in the Living Lab in UL. And our research and that fusion of ideas and creativity will inform the design and development of this prototype, of this project. So it has a huge ambition, and we have a really rich collection of people, and I'm delighted to kind of share with you today some of the members of it. We have Paul here from the University of Nottingham, Helen Phelan, the head of the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance, and Professor Raymond Friel, who's one of the most renowned law professors in Ireland, and Rui Anand, Dr. Rui Anand, who is actually Professor Friel's past PhD researcher. And Rui's been doing amazing research on mixed reality, extended reality, regulation and governance. And Simon Thompson, he's the head of education for the Irish Chamber Orchestra, and Amanda Clifford from the Health Research Institute. And we have many more people. And the simple idea with this project is it is about people, it is about research, it is about collaboration, it is about kind of pushing the boundaries of innovation, it is about moving the state of the art across many, many different kind of contexts. So if you look at this infographic, this kind of is my simplification of XTREME. So it's technological innovation through creation, right? So we're actually doing the science in a very unusual way. And what's unique about this is that we're doing the science through a creative medium. So we're creating productions that communicate the scientific innovation. So that's very unique, that's very different, and it's very challenging, but that's what we're doing. And the way we're kind of communicating that science and innovation is by creating 4 immersive experiences. And these will showcase the science and innovation that we're developing. The UL Living Lab has this really responsible and challenging role to assess and validate those immersive experiences. And this is something that we'll do in the Living Lab over the next year and a half. And then the consortium will build upon that feedback and improve the research to create something that hopefully will offer open source solutions that other people can build upon this research and develop extended reality and mixed reality innovation in the European Union. So the Living Lab is a collective. It's a collective of people coming together. It's a collective of ideas. It's a collective of questions. And it's a space where we can ask these questions and address these questions and use that discussion and dialogue to inform the design, development, and ultimately the use of this prototype. And that will inform ultimately what will be the next generation of extended reality and mixed reality research. So the core idea is that we don't want technology to be built solely by technological entities, commercial actors, right? We've seen from social media how technology can start off with the most ambitious, positive narrative, but actually introduce complex risks and ethical questions. So what we're trying to do with the Living Lab is actually anticipate these challenges and questions. And through that engagement and discussion and that anticipation and that reflexivity, then we'll inform the research. So one of the things we're working at the moment is that we have a big deliverable going in a month or so. And we're actually, what Rui's done, and Ray and myself, is we've actually identified a way to support EU innovation around extended reality, because we've essentially pieced together from all of the regulatory mechanisms that are in place in the EU to show that actually extended reality innovation and commercialization is well covered by the corpus of EU regulation that's in place already. And that's a really strategic thing to communicate, because what it means is that the EU can leverage this technology and actually align it with human social values. And I don't think anywhere else, any other region in the world can do that. So it's a very kind of important and positive thing to do this research in the EU. So one of the interesting kind of components to what we're doing in the Living Lab is we've got 3 case studies, essentially, that we'll be investigating in terms of how this technology could potentially offer social benefits. Professor Hilary Moss is a world-leading expert in music therapy, so she'll be working with researchers to better understand the feasibility of mixed reality in terms of how it might fit with her research and her world in terms of music therapy. And Professor Kathleen Turner, who's again a world-leading expert in community music, she'll be investigating how this innovation can be used to support community music. And one thing we learned actually with the COVID pandemic is that, we were all really able and interested to jump into digital platforms and environments. But if there was ever another pandemic, mixed reality, extended reality probably will be the go-to solution for that engagement. So we're anticipating, the opportunities of how to inform this technology now so that people can get better, more informed, ethical, and responsible use of it. And then the third case study is a really interesting one. We'll be actually seeing if this experience of immersive reality and the social aspect of it can help us maybe enable people to address complex social questions. And I think this is a really interesting opportunity, because there's questions that, what we've seen with social media, polarization, democratic decline, is that we know that children, especially young people, are easily influenced, and are easily influenced by misinformation and disinformation and fake news. So, using this technology and this innovation as a more stimulating environment to address these complex social questions is an opportunity that we're interested in investigating as well. So this is just some of the people that's involved with XTREME. It is a large collective of people, and it's a large collective of different worldviews, different ideas, all of us coming together trying to interrogate these complex questions. And what we've learned already is that people have different views, and people have different kind of ways of understanding the benefits and risks of the technology. And that kind of multiple kind of perspective engagement and openness is helping us to already inform what this technology ought to look like in the future. So the 4 productions are probably the most exciting part of XTREME. And as I mentioned today, we have the first glimpse of the Irish World Academy Music and Dance production, and Helen will talk about that shortly. We have the Irish Chamber Orchestra production, and Simon will briefly speak to that in a moment. And we have the Munch Museum production and the Finnish National Opera and Ballet. So those are the 4 productions, are very different productions, but essentially those productions are the medium that, as I said, we're going to communicate the scientific innovation of this project. So I'm going to ask Helen to come up and talk about the wonderful work she has done in developing the first production from the Irish World Academy of Music and Dance.
Thanks, Martin. So I probably came to this project a little later than some of my other colleagues here. I came when I was appointed as director of the Irish World Academy, and this idea of some kind of production coming out of the Academy was something that Martin began to talk with me about. And I think in some of the earlier conversations with Martin and colleagues, the thing that really helped me at the beginning was this understanding that what we were trying to do was not an act of translation from a physical world to a virtual world, but something that would exist between worlds. And that immediately resonated with me, because my own background is in myth and ritual and medieval chant. And, so much of our Irish folklore and mythology exists in that space between worlds, between the natural and the supernatural, the terrestrial and the extraterrestrial, but also between the elemental worlds, between water and land, or land and air. And I thought, there's something there that we could lean back into in terms of where the storytelling might start. And I suppose the other thing about folklore and mythology is that it's constantly reinvented, reimagined. So the idea of maybe looking at particular figures or stories and saying, well, how might these amazing artists and technicians reimagine those in this other media? And I think the third thing that was really important to me is that these mythological and folkloric figures, they're very often universal archetypes, but they're almost always very locally located. They're connected with a river, a mountain, a hill, a place. So it just, to me, made perfect sense that the starting point for this would be our own beautiful place and space. This incredible campus, which is, marked and distinguished by the most extraordinary river on these islands, the River Shannon. And many of you, or some of you may know, the Irish Royal Academy of Music and Dance, where myself and many of my colleagues work. And if you walk across that beautiful pedestrian bridge over the Shannon, the first thing you'll see is our building. And if you come in that foyer, you'll see this magnificent mosaic, which is the story of the mythology of the river. And the story is of a young woman called Shona, and she had a great desire for the wisdom of the world. And she was told, it was foreseen, that if she could find the well of Conla, which was surrounded by the 9 hazel trees of wisdom, and could pluck one of those hazelnuts. I wore my hazelnut today in honor of Shona. Pluck one of those hazelnuts and consume it, that she would have all the wisdom of the world. And there are lots of different variations of the story in the manuscripts, but essentially the water of the well rises up, subsumes Shona, and Shona becomes the river. The version I like most is, and the one that we have over in the Academy, is Shona becomes her own flow. So she becomes this kind of archetype for the pursuit of wisdom. So I think that's where a lot of our conversation started, like, could this Shona figure be the person who would tell the story, but tell the story by singing the story, dancing the story? And then immediately we thought, well, who might be able to help us do that? And the artist who immediately came to my mind was the extraordinary Muireann Yowlig and her musical colleague and collaborator, Donal O'Connor, and our own wonderful Academy student, Sarah Fennell, a singer, a musician, a dancer. So we extended that idea and that conversation out to these team of artists who I think were very, very excited by it. But immediately, Muireann, of course, so much of her own work is located in the Dingle Peninsula, in the west of Ireland. And she immediately started riffing on this kind of idea and said, well, what about the folklore of that place, the folklore of the puka, of the fairy, of the songs coming off the water? And then we got really excited because now we had a river, we had an ocean, we had a mythology, we had a folklore, and we had the idea of, well, what if we had the story that came from the singer was the story of the puka, the story of the fairy, coming in from the ocean. So the song is a story about a woman who is enthralled to the fairies, and this song comes to the fishermen from the voices of the air. So she would come and tell that story, and then Sarah would dance the story of the river. And the more we talked about it, the more it became an ecological story. Like we had a message coming from the air, from the water. We had a message coming up out of the river. So what would that message be? And the message was, Éist, listen, pay attention. The water and the air and the land have something to tell you. Look at what's happening in the world. So these narratives develop to say, there is an important message that we need to bring. The other really important thing I learned from Martin is that idea that this would come into people's living rooms, into their homes, which really, that gave me another whole sense of it, that you could bring the river, you could bring the air, you could bring sound music into people's living room and say, we have a story to tell you, we have a message to impart, which is of course a very strong motif in mythology, isn't it? It's the person or the animal or the spirit that embodies a message. So I think that was part of the origin story of where, so once we had that idea that there was a message that was going to be imparted by these extraordinary singers, musicians, dancers, the next stage, and I might turn back to Mark, the next stage of the story then was then how would that message look and sound and communicate to people in this between world space between the live experience and sound and kinesthetic world of music and dance and this reimagined space of that communication. Well, I turn back to you there, Martin, to continue the story.
So developing this production, so Helen basically conceptualized the whole thing, and there was a team of us. Let's say there was Aina, Paul, Christian, and myself, and we worked on this over a period of months with the artists. But it was that kind of creative idea, and then finally come to that point where, well, how do we do this? How do we make this? How do we create this immersive environment to communicate all of those important points that Helen spoke of? And we did it. And this is the amazing thing. That's what you'll see shortly. So an interesting thing here is that we're investing probably hundreds of thousands in these productions, in developing these productions, and they will be absolutely beyond state of the art. And the finished productions that people will get to experience will be unlike anything else that's currently available. And it's an amazing opportunity that we have the World Academy of Music and Dance doing one of these productions, and we also have the Irish Chamber Orchestra, who are based here in Limerick University, doing one as well. And that was my strategy from the very beginning, is to utilize the people and the research and the art and the artistic creativity in UL as much as possible. So that theme of nature and the environment continues with the ICO production. So we've chosen Vivaldi's Four Seasons, and we're working with Henning Kragerud, who's a famous violinist. Simon, do you want to come up for a couple of minutes and explain? You know more about this than I do. But we're going to talk about the actual production with Paul in a moment too.
Thanks, Martin. Hello, everyone. So, as Martin said, the ICO is on campus here in UL, and we are a chamber orchestra. And chamber orchestras, you might think, have a certain perception. We're a little bit formal, very traditional. We play the dots on the page, and, you know, we strive for excellence. So this project allows us to do something different. As Martin said earlier, you know, there's very little that beats that live, in-person experience. The vibration in the room, the sounds, the people you're sat next to, all that. But with XTREME, what we can offer is not a pale sort of facsimile of a live performance. We can actually offer a new product, something that allows us to be more creative, something that allows the participant or the, I don't know, is it a digital audience, to make choices of their own. So it opens up what we currently do as a performance. And in terms of engagement, that's key. Because if we're to engage new audiences or audiences who are typically furthest from the reach because they may have a disability or they may be, you know, some situation that prevents them coming to a live show, this is a way that we can do it, but we can offer them something more, something extra. And very rarely we get chance to play, you know. And my background is creating empathy and complicity, shared experience through play. So this opportunity was, oh, great. And the piece we chose was Four Seasons. Why? Well, 4 seasons in between each little movement, there's poetry written in the score, which most of an audience would never know about or see. These are like footnotes for the musicians, for the conductor. And there's things like dogs barking, drunken dances, you know, sitting by the fireside with a crackling fire. An XTREME allows us to explore that as well as the notation. So it allows us to a new insight into a very traditional canon of work by bringing alive something that we would not normally do through performance. And Henning is a specialist in creating engaged performances. He breaks the rules of classical music. He dances around the stage. He actively breaks the fourth wall. And he talks to the audience personally and has conversations with them. So that's where the idea came from for using the 4 seasons. And we can really see so many new opportunities for mixed reality. It isn't something that's ever going to replace what we do. It's actually a new offering which has enhancements and options for the audience. Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. So I think time is moving on, so I'm going to skip a bit here. I'm going to let Paul speak to the other productions because he knows far more the technical stuff than I do. And I'm going to bring up Amanda now, because one of the interesting things with XTREME is that our collaboration is already enabling further research. And Amanda saw the opportunity to actually go out and pursue research that speaks to another benefit of this innovation, to support people who have Parkinson's. Amanda, do you want to come up?
Thank you so much. So just as they had said earlier, we saw that this was an opportunity to look further. So my background is physiotherapy. I'm based over at the School of Allied Health, and I've worked a lot with the Irish Academy of Music and Dance and colleagues there, where we've looked at the benefits of arts-based programmes for health and well-being. So we did look at the benefits of dance for people with Parkinson's disease, and also we looked at dance and music for older adults in the community. So that's where this idea came from, looking at fun ways to be able to engage in an activity, and it provides that benefit as well. So what we did was we applied from this project, actually. There's lots of people that are working as part of this project on our project as well, with colleagues right across Europe, Canada and Australia. We've brought together expertise in technology and also expertise across rehabilitation, where we're looking to see what are the benefits of this type of technology in the rehabilitation for people with Parkinson's. Excuse me. So this HRB funded study is allowing us to explore what's in the literature. So we started off with the scoping review, looking at what's the evidence base, what currently has mixed reality been used for within the context of Parkinson's. And then from looking at that research, we wanted to see what were the things that were good about that, and what were some of the gaps, and what did we need to explore further. And what was very evident from that research was that there was very little participatory input. There was very little input from people themselves who had the condition, where they would say what they felt they would like from this technology. And I think that aligns very nicely with this project, where we're thinking about the user experience. We also wanted to look at that within the context of Parkinson's. So following on from the scoping review, we brought together the members of the working group in the Parkinson's Institute in Italy, and they formed their ideas thinking about the opportunities and challenges within this particular context, and also considering these ethical issues that are so important that have also been mentioned at the start here. And what we're doing then in June is we have a World Cafe where we're bringing people together with Parkinson's and their carers, together with clinicians, to really explore those issues and to think about the opportunities, challenges and ethical issues around using mixed reality for people with Parkinson's. And at that, they'll have the opportunity to explore this technology and also give their opinions, which we're hoping then will form recommendations to inform future research within this particular context. So I just have one slide here that's going to talk about some of those potential benefits. So of course we're considering those challenges, and we've looked at the challenges and any of those adverse effects that are within those within the current research, but also thinking very much about those opportunities. So in terms of optimizing movement, so there's motor and non-motor symptoms, but here we're thinking about how is it that this can be used to facilitate movement. We know that with Parkinson's, a visual and an auditory cue are really important to facilitate movement. Skill learning and cognition, so we know that it can have motor symptoms, and through such a system such as this, you could be able to provide opportunities for that skill learning and for the cognitive development. And also a key part that came out from this was about education as a source for to build on knowledge and education. And a key part of any type of movement type program or engaging in any type of rehabilitation, it's the motivation to continue is key. So we feel that by providing something that's fun and engaging will enable that motivation to happen. And I think one of the key things with mixed reality as well is that there's lots of research that's on virtual reality, but with that mixed environment, we're hoping that that's a more safe environment because you have the reality together with the virtual, and that could be important within this context too. And a key part, and I know from the talk that was on earlier today, community was key. So by people engaging in activity together and having that social interaction can be really helpful, because within the community or people with living with Parkinson's, loneliness is very high and social isolation can happen as people tend to withdraw from activities rather than engaging in community. And it can also be, I suppose, by engaging with this, it can create that sense of achievement and well-being, and the interactions that can happen within those contexts can be really helpful in terms of support and knowledge. And those can happen within a community themselves with Parkinson's, but also lots of nice opportunities for intergenerational activities together in the community to increase awareness around the condition. So that's one of the main things that we're working on, which has kind of stemmed from some of the work that we've been doing as part of this group. So thank you.
So we're very fortunate today to have Professor Paul Tennant from the University of Nottingham come over, and Paul is responsible for a lot of the technical development. But what's unique about Paul's research and work is that that technical development speaks to the strategy of XTREME. It's informed by artistic creativity. So I'm delighted to welcome Paul to not only introduce the first production that he's worked on a lot, and he was working on at 3 o'clock in the morning last night. Paul is an avid believer in the positive use of this technology, and his enthusiasm and positivity has been a huge driver in the project as a whole. So I'm very thankful, Paul, to be here.
It's always nice to get a bit of applause before you start. I'm just going to actually change presentation. Right, I was doing that because I may have been editing my slides quite late at night as well. Okay, so I thought I'd take a slight step back and talk methodologically for a minute. Martin's talked about the importance of research and the importance of creativity in that research, and how XTREME is doing something quite unusual. Well, for me, it's doing something that's quite prosaic, because I've been doing research through art, using art as a method of doing research for the last 19 years. And I'm lucky enough to work in Nottingham's Mixed Reality Lab that's been taking that approach for the last 25 years. Collaboration with artists changes the way we think about our research. It changes the way we think about the environment around us. It changes the way we think about the technology that we work with. And as designers and technologists, we tend to have quite a lot of implicit biases about how people will use technology, what sorts of things they'll do with it, what are the expectations. I've made an amazing new piece of kit, and I give it to an artist, and the artist doesn't do at all what I expected them to do with it. They completely bend it into a new shape. And that's really exciting. Of course, artists have their own sets of biases, but they're different to mine. So by combining together with artists and creatives, we're able to change the way in which we do our research. So methodologically, I'm not just asking artists to take my technology and do an art with it. Rather, it becomes a deeply collaborative process where we enhance the technology in response to the requirements of the artist. The artist might shape their thinking around something we'd like to explore. And what that means is that we have to do research while we're doing it. So we deeply document the processes. We use a lot of ethnographic methods when we're doing that. And then we reflect on the themes that emerge from doing that work. And it's not just about the artists themselves, it's also about the audiences. You have to reflect on the experience of the audiences when they're thinking about or when they're engaging with your technology, and when they're reflecting themselves on your technology, when they're talking to their friends about their technology, and when they're making government policy about your technology. Right? Audiences are important parts of that, and artists can engage people and engage audiences far beyond what we can normally do in a university. Right? I'm sure we've all read hundreds of papers where we had a study of 12 people who looked at this thing, or we had a sample of 300 people who filled in this questionnaire. A lot of the time, these are dealing with unengaging technical demos, right? They're dealing with very structured lab experiments. But when you work in the creative space, when you work with artists, what you get is very ecologically valid experiences. You get experiences in the real world. We used to call it in the wild, these experiences. And the outcomes are not just for research. They're not just for me as a scientist, but they're also for the creatives, right? The creatives get their own intentions met by what they're doing. So they're able to deliver a new experience which gives a particular message that they're trying for. And at the same time, we're producing world-leading research around it. So that's why, that's my soapbox on research through art. One of the ways we do this at Nottingham, so I'm the creative director of the Virtual Immersive Production Studio. And this is a studio with a very specific mission. The idea was to look at what does it take to make immersive technology? What does it take to make immersive experiences? What technologies do you need to have in the room? What expertise do you need to have in the room? But most importantly, how can you do that on a shoestring budget? Right? So there's two reasons why we're doing it on a shoestring budget. One is we don't have any money. XTREME has definitely helped with that. We have a little bit more money. I bought a really expensive camera recently. It was brilliant. But actually, the reality is a lot of creatives don't have a lot of money. Right? So the tech companies will work with the London Philharmonic Orchestra. The tech companies will work with the National Theatre, and they'll put together huge showpieces that they'll spend £1 million on. But my local theatre can't do that. Right? So my local theatre wants to put on an amazing immersive experience with holograms in it too. So what I want to do is to say, okay, well, how can we enable that? How can we make the high-end technology available to people who want to use it, making it accessible, but then also how can we make democratized versions of that technology that are available to people? And XTREME actually has an incredibly good mission with respect to that. So XTREME depends quite a lot on motion capture as a technology. And motion capture traditionally, dots and suits, right? You need a 50,000 or more, probably £150,000 Vicon tracking system, 16 to 32 cameras. You need people to wear suits with reflective dots on them. And that's quite an expensive piece of infrastructure. But XTREME says, let's not do that. Let's use a mobile phone camera. And then we'll use machine learning to work out the position of that person. And that's technology which is just emerging now. It isn't great yet, but it's getting there. And we're hoping by the end of XTREME, we'll almost be able to make the Vicon obsolete. So we draw expertise from all over our university to make this lab work. We've got quantum physicists, we've got creatives from all over the place, we've got AI ethics folks, we've got astronomers, we've got audiologists, we've got people from translation studies looking into how best to do creative captioning. It's a huge mix of people, a great melting pot of creativity. And I was very lucky to have just kind of built this space just at the time when XTREME arrived. And so, obviously, the next thing we were going to do was bring XTREME to the studio. So I'm going to show you a little video, a very short video, of when Maureen and Donal and the ICO came to Nottingham and what we did with them.
I feel like I've had an out-of-body experience.
Well, this has been quite an incredible experience. And sometimes you come into these situations and you think, will it be very unnatural? Will it be very, forced?
Rediscovered the music in a new way.
But it felt really, really comfortable, really good.
Miming with a violin is fine. Miming with that one is difficult.
We're all learning at the same time, which I think is probably a good thing.
It's been very fluid, it's been very natural.
You know what you're doing because you're playing, but it's going to be how it's turned into something that will be intriguing.
So I want to just pull to one particular frame here, this one. It's a bit of a weird shot, this. Maureen's playing the flute, but she's not playing the flute. Why is she not playing the flute there, do we think? I don't know if I'm allowed interactivity in this. So she's not playing the flute because what we're trying to do is capture her facial expressions. And so if you want to 3D model a character, you have to have a good camera view of their face to do it. So we had to convince Maureen to hold the flute down and pretend to be playing it so that we could get this really clean view of her face. Now the problem with that is Maureen has spent, 40 years playing the flute. She really wants to bring it up to her mouth. So when we're working through the data, I kept going, I can't use these frames, can't use these frames. It's frustrating, but really interesting, right? You get this challenge. And these are the sort of challenges you don't really think of until you start doing it. So research through practice is incredibly important, right? The engineers will tell you, yes, of course it's easy to just get somebody's face, just get them to mime. But it's hard to get them to mime in the real world, and that's why you have to do this work in the real world. Oh, I was trying to play it again. So this is another little video where I just look at some of the steps involved in getting from Maureen to some of her various formats. So we've got on the left-hand side a chroma keyed video. So this is your classic green screen cutout video. You'll notice it looks the best of all three of them. Don't worry too much about that. The second one is a motion capture, and this is using our partner Marionette's software. So this motion capture comes from a single video, a monocular video motion capture, to use the technical term. And on the right is a very early volumetric capture. We'll see in a minute how that improves. The volumetric capture is essentially where you use multiple cameras to construct a point cloud. You take that point cloud, and that then gives you a 3D video of the person. Now, 3D video is a really interesting space. So not 3D video in the kind of IMAX, oh, I wear a pair of glasses and I watch things coming out towards me sense, but 3D video in the sense of, here's a person that is volumetrically present that I can walk around and engage with. So just a little tiny bit of Maureen singing that beautiful song. Possibly. So you can see there's some quirks in there. Hands are not quite where they should be. Feet are not quite where they should be. There's a lot of correcting work still needs to be done when you do motion capture. And that's true of any motion capture pipeline. Even if you're using dots and suits, you still have to correct things. What I'd want to do now is to move to the beginning of the premiere. Now, I will tell you that Martin has bigged it up somewhat. This is what I would refer to as a deconstructed premiere, in that I'm going to show you a couple of different bits of it in different ways. Okay, so I'm going to start with this one, and when you look at this, I want you to ignore the characters completely. The characters here are placeholders, or at least Maureen and Donal are placeholders here. I want you to focus on the mosaic and the complexity of the mosaic. I want you to focus on the transitions that happen here, because this is kind of defining the aesthetic. So this is running on a Vision Pro. This is a very, very early prototype running on a Vision Pro. The Vision Pro presents a number of challenges to do with its ability to render at any given time. And it's not quite connected to the wall as it should be in here, but short demonstrative video. So notice the puka coming out of the mosaic with this kind of mosaic aesthetic that's embedded in the experience. And for the moment, the puka is now turning into Sarah to dance, but in due course it will fully be Sarah dancing. Right, I'm just, oh, what's happened there? Right, again, I'm just going to scroll through for a moment. So there's a lot of kind of interesting stuff here. The mosaic is animated in of itself. The mosaic is also composed of particles. So this is not a static object, but it's actually a particle cloud, and that means we can start doing really interesting effects with it. Where I want to go next is the volumetric capture of the performance. So this is technically not running on a Vision Pro, this is technically running on my laptop last night. So these are 3D models, and you can see they're a little bit scratchy, but it sounds quite nice. And so we can have a full performance of this one, and then I'll move on to a couple of other examples. Notice they're casting shadows in the room. Now, a couple of characteristics of this that I want to draw attention to. First of all, I will draw attention to the fact that the sound is ever so slightly out of sync. I take no responsibility for that because I'm deaf. And so it's really difficult to put sound together and to synchronize sound really carefully. However, we do have a sound team who will be fixing that shortly. There's a bit of technical lag that causes that to happen. However, so these are volumetric captures, and they start with point clouds and they try to reconstruct. But Helen told us earlier about this beautiful mosaic, and we have this lovely mosaic effect. So I think, well, actually, we don't necessarily want photorealistic characters. Perhaps it would be more interesting to make use of these and start to create mosaic effects. So on to the next slide. I've got a little bit of a tech test here for the idea of trying to make the characters out of mosaics. Because one of the benefits of having a point cloud is you can start treating those points as particles. You can start treating those points as, for example, mosaic tiles. So I'm not going to play the whole track again, but here's a little bit of what we've just seen, but this time with mosaic characters. And you have to imagine them against the background of that beautiful mosaic. there's a really interesting aesthetic challenge here, where you're dealing with a photorealistic background, because we're going to be looking at our real background, but now we've brought these mosaic characters in, and they look very out of place. And once those mosaic characters are stepping out of a real mosaic, we think they're going to feel really quite connected into the space. So that mosaic will appear on your wall, these characters will step out from it, and they'll become a part of your room. Another thing I was kind of interested in trying to do, if it'll let me, is to combine those together. So now behind the mosaic we have the photorealistic characters lurking, sort of ghost-like in there. So I was interested in this idea that the mosaics might be somehow creating the ghosts of these characters. Can we deliver that combined aesthetic? Still working a little bit on the particle effects to get the right balance there. This was what I was doing late last night. But what I think is really interesting about starting with point clouds is that you can start to create dreamlike experiences. So I want to go to one more of these videos. So these are using much smaller points, and these are the kind of numbers of points that we start to use in Gaussian splats. So just to give you some idea, there are 20 million points in each one of these characters. So my computer is falling over while it's trying to do it. But this I particularly like. So we start creating trails, start creating a sense that there's some spirit left behind by these characters. And I think, for me, one of the things that's interesting here is that it's not about disguising the seams in the technology, but it's about recognizing that we're never going to get a perfect photorealistic reconstruction from the data that we've got, but we can build aesthetics around that lean into that the mosaic effect is part of the story, right? You don't need photorealism for a mosaic effect. It would look weird if you had photorealism for a mosaic effect. So how do you then build a story around that and make it work? Okay, I'm going to move on. So only half of the experience is the performance itself, right? I mentioned earlier on the audience was really important. And if I'm going to watch an experience in a mixed reality headset, what does it look like to be an audience member for that? I'm going to be inviting other people into my space, into my room. What does that look like? How should I be presented to other people? Should I look like myself? Should I have a photorealistic me? Maybe. But I might not want to do that. I might want to present myself as a different type of avatar. We're all very used to doing that in virtual online spaces. We present ourselves as usually one of a set of choices given by somebody. And in fact, I've got some research happening in Nottingham at the moment about what are the implications of the avatars that you choose, right? And we have some wonderful research being done by a PhD student called Favor Borachini into the kind of legal and ethical implications of defined avatar choices for people who are, for example, disabled or from an ethnic minority, and the implications of going online and presenting yourself as that, and then the implications of not being able to present yourself as yourself. And sometimes you might want to, sometimes you might not want to, right? So there's an awful lot of work on, the dangers of online spaces that avatars play a significant role in. That's just about how you present yourself, but how do you present other people in your space? How do you represent other people in your space? In its virtual reality, it's really easy, right? In virtual reality, we've got a virtual space. We all go to the virtual space, and it doesn't matter how we're organized because nobody cares, right? Because you're just in virtual space, right? You're not in a real room. The problem with mixed reality is I'm in my living room, which is 4 meters by 4 meters. Martin's in his living room, which is 35 meters by 35 meters. he's relaxing on his golden couch. How do I fit him into my room? How do I make him make sense in my room? If he's where he really is, he'd be floating in the wall, right? Do I want him floating in the wall? But if he doesn't float in the wall, how do I make that work? So we have these spatial identity relationships, right? If I put him next to me, it's important that he still seems to be looking at what he's actually looking at. If there are multiple of us, we need to correct for looking in the right directions, talking to each other. We need to correct for pointing. All these kind of indexicality issues become a problem when you start reorganizing people. So here are just a couple of slides that describe that. So here we've got one room on one side. no gigantic rooms in this example. We have one room on one side, 2 people sitting on a couch, another room on the other side, 1 person sitting on a corner couch, right? So how do you make that work? Well, one possibility is you just present them where they are, right? So if I position that person in my room relative to the screen, let's assume for a moment that this here is a screen. If I present them relative to the screen where they actually are, then the spatial relationships are preserved, but in case 1, we've got a person sitting behind me in the wall, and in case 2, I've got 2 audience members right in my way. Right? That's not an ideal way of doing it. So the alternative is to realign people discreetly. In this case, you direct somebody to sit on your chair, or rather you direct the system to make that person sit on your chair. And that means we then have to intervene technically. So these are the sorts of challenges that mixed reality brings out. It's not just about how you make the best possible performance, but it's about how you deliver the social experience of actually watching a performance together. And that's where the Living Lab will come in for us, is to be able to do these studies, to be able to do ecologically valid studies of people in their real environments having this shared experience. These are not answered questions. This is still very much active research within the project. It matters because we don't know what the mixed reality metaverse looks like. Right? We know what the metaverse looks like, and it's rubbish. But the mixed reality metaverse is interesting because now we're inviting people into our homes. We're not going to a new place. Who do we want to invite into our homes? Why do we want to invite them? What sorts of rules do we want to set? Do we want to set policies for different types of people? You know, do I want to be able to share what my house looks like? Do I want to digitally clean my house before I invite somebody into it? All these kinds of questions are surfaced by the idea of digitally inviting people into your house. So just to kind of follow up a little bit on where the innovation is in XTREME. So scenographies in mixed reality generally fall into one of 2 categories. By scenography, I mean how the scene is organized. Okay? So there's the standard augmented reality approach. That's sort of what we're doing with the World Academy project, where we put digital content in the room with you. Virtual characters appear in our space, and so this little example here shows these 2 digital characters appearing in my space, dancing, singing for me. That's great. That is an awful lot of mixed reality experiences look like that. The second version is the spatial video approach. The spatial video approach, my wall falls away and I look into a virtual world. This is usually done with high quality filming. This is not usually digital characters. And most of the content that Apple and Meta are now selling is this. And it might be look at a football match, or look at a film, or look at Alicia Keys doing her studio performance. And they're great. They look really nice. Right? The quality of these is fantastic because they're using incredibly high-end spatial cameras. But you can't interact with it. It's at a distance, right? It is beyond your space. It's essentially like having a big screen or a 3D cinema in your house. So what we suggested then is that we could mix those 2 cases together. So could we make it so that characters who are inhabiting a world beyond our space can then walk through the screen, a bit like the puka jumping out of the mosaic, can come out of the screen and into our space. And to do that, we want to use a mix of capture technologies. We want to use spatial video because the best production comes from spatial video. But the problem with spatial video is it's flat. Right? It may have a little bit of parallaxing, but it's basically flat. If I bring the character out, they're going to look like a cardboard cutout. So now we have to mix that with the volumetric technologies. So this, for me, is where the scenographies start to get really interesting, because you can create interactions, you can create aspects of the experience that are in the space with you, that you can touch and feel and engage with. Now, what we're proposing to do is to take that a step further, and let's work in 360 degrees. So instead of it just being looking into a further room, it's looking all the way around me. It's expanding my room to be a larger space, which is beyond the physical boundaries of my room, and still allowing characters to transition in. And that brings us to the ICO technical concept. So the idea of the ICO concept is that we're going to look out of our living room to this 360 stereoscopic view of the orchestra performing for us. Henning, the lead, is going to walk out of that video and appear in our space with us, perform with us, do his fabulous, I think you mentioned that he likes to move around, he likes to break the fourth wall. Well, here we're going to let him literally break the fourth wall. He's going to come into our space, he's going to talk to us, and then he's going to go back and perform with the orchestra. And so this is a completely new scenography. Nobody has done this. Nobody is doing anything like this anywhere in the world. We have no idea if it's going to work, but I'm sure it will. I'm very confident. The other thing we're going to do is, so I was showing you the point cloud systems that we've got. Well, there's some new point cloud technology at the moment called Gaussian splatting that is improving the fidelity of those volumetric performances. So just here's a little video, hopefully, of a bit of Gaussian splatting happening. So this is the same thing. This is a point cloud demo. It's just lots and lots of points, and those points are, they use something called neural radiance fields, which I definitely don't have time to explain, which is lucky because I don't know how they work. So yeah, this is Spinning Dancer. This is a commercial product, but we're looking at trying to use the same technology within XTREME to have these kind of really good 3D representations of people. However, right at the moment, that's really hard to do on a headset. I know that looks like it's running on a headset there, but it's not. That's running on a PC connected to the headset, right? So doing this at scale, efficiently on what's essentially a mobile phone strapped to your face is a real technical challenge for our team. So we're still really early in the process of building XTREME experiences. We're doing lots of work around the technology behind it. We're doing lots of work around the social organization, around the human-computer interaction, how people experience and communicate with, through, and around these technologies. Each prototype builds on the findings from the last one, so we did a huge amount of work to get to the point where we were ready to put the World Academy project together. We are still putting the World Academy project together. I've done enormous work on preparing for the ICO, and the ICO very much builds on what we've done for the World Academy. When we go to Munch, the challenge with Munch is going to be that it's situated. So instead of being in your house, it's going to be in the Munch Museum, and it's going to have a companion piece in the ITU labs. And the idea of that one, essentially, is that we're going to mix people who are together in these two spaces. We're going to mix them and have them experience the work of Silvana Imam, who's a hip-hop artist from Norway. We're going to have this extraordinary shared experience which mixes spatial audio that is in the room with you with personalized spatial audio on the headsets. So it's very much focused on the audio, focused on telling Sylvia's story. And it brings us, I think, the story is going to bring us from birth to death in an intriguing fashion, at least for half of the people consuming it. The second half are going to consume death to birth, and they're going to meet in the middle and have this extraordinary kind of guided experience in the middle. And then finally, the Finnish National Opera. We're going to bring all of these things together. We're going to use the same mixed scenography that I've just talked about for the Irish Chamber Orchestra. We're going to use 4 arias from a piece called Morning Star, which is a young adult's children's book that has been turned into a spectacular opera. And that will involve things like a car crashing through the wall of your house and the character who performs the aria sort of staggering out of the car and singing to you. Right? These are the kinds of things that we can do with these mixed reality scenographies. And we're going to cut away to the massive kind of opera performance itself. So each performance has its own character, it has its own art direction, has its own collection of technologies. We're lucky enough to have a huge collection of different technologists and technologies as part of the consortium. And so we're able to cherry pick from those technologies what we want to demonstrate in each performance. This is not a project where we have one performance that has to shoehorn everything in. We can choose what we need to for each one. And it's a really exciting project to work on for me because I get to work with all these amazing people and I get to work in this high culture space and with a range of really fascinating partners, both creative and research. Ultimately, it's about pushing the technology. It's about using art to push the technology. So getting it right is not just about maximizing fidelity, but it's about doing it in an actual production pipeline. So, we have people who are... That dancer doing the Gaussian splat there, that is a 10-second video. Right, 10-second video is great, but it doesn't work for a 3-hour opera. Right, so there's lots of questions about how you do things in the real world. And so XTREME is allowing us to do that by having these productions, which are incredibly important to the artists behind them. It's not just about demonstrating the technology, it's about understanding how that technology is going to work in the real world, and how with good writing, good story making, and good art direction, we can push the boundaries not just of what's possible with the technology, but what's creatively possible in a mixed reality context. And then we use all that to interrogate the technical, the social, the ethical, the governance, the economic implications of what I like to call the mixed reality metaverse. And that, you'll be pleased to know, is me finished.
Thanks, Paul. That was amazing. So we'll have a panel discussion now. I think we're probably well over time, but we're interested in your feedback and questions and having a bit of a chat about it all. Okay? So, who wants to ask the first question?
I'm interested to know about the ethical side of this, and maybe that's where Ray can come in, around the artists and their engagement and their willingness to participate in handing over, not only their musical performance, but all of the so much personal information that's going with the project. So I'm just interested to know how you've tackled that particularly live issue right now, because we see the artist community around the world grappling with this challenge.
It's a really good question, and I think one of the issues is no one ever claps the lawyers when they come on, and it's just the worst group of people to ever to work with, because it always appears like as if we're telling people what they can't do, but in a sense, really, and what's been exciting about this particular project has been trying to work out how we can construct it so that people can do what they want to do. So one of the first things we have to do is to work out exactly these sort of background ideas, which are quite novel, I think we will agree from our perspective. But we're really trying to be positive and create the framework which will allow people to do this. There's a lot of work for us involved in that, and I think one of the big issues is, when I was growing up, one of the first electronic games that I had was, for those old enough may remember, the table tennis game on the TV set. And I remember thinking, it doesn't get any better than this. But the problem for us is to trying to develop and to look at what rules and regulations apply in a technology that is constantly changing, and how we can effectuate what people want, and particularly in an artistic context. So I think it is really, really difficult for us, but it's a really enjoyable sort of approach that we're taking, and it's really something I think that will be of benefit even beyond this project, because this is a greater issue for a lot of areas within the new technologies which are emerging, where we are trying to guess what you can do and to try and find out what rules will survive and where they will go forward. I don't think there's ever been a time in societal development that it has been so open-ended for the legal and ethical professions. And I think what Martin said in the very beginning, which is really crucial, the choices that we have to make are very much based on our values. We can create any rules that you want. We can have any concepts that you want. But the important point, I think, is that the law has to reflect what the ethical and values of the society in which we live. So there's going to be very different answers if you go to, say, places like China or the US or Europe. And what we have to do is try and work out what the rules are going to be for us. I don't know, would Ruhi like to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with all of that, that we have to kind of reflect and take a moment to understand what the future generations would want from this experience as well. And just on your point about how artists were comfortable giving up so much of themselves, I think most of the artists did agree that there's something bigger at play here, and this is for the future, that they were willing to make that little sacrifice for, future technological development and also future ethical evaluations and our understanding of what we want the future to look like. And it's so interesting with virtual reality. It's you know, it's separated. There's a separation between our reality and our virtual avatars or their lives. It's like a second life, like the game. But with mixed reality, that line is blurring. So it's not like previously we've had norms and codes for how life in public is to be governed, or how should you behave when you're with people in someone else's space. But that line is now blurring, like Paul was saying, that we're inviting people digitally into our own homes. Like, we hadn't had to think about that previously, and the digital cleaning aspect of it as well, that now there might be room for a new third space and might be room for regulation of that third space, and we've never done that before. Well, we haven't, you know, religious institutions have been the third space historically, but we haven't had to think about that because there was a value system that it was being built on, but this third space is just completely uncharted territory. So yeah, there's a lot at play, and I think the artists have been very, very generous in giving a bit of themselves, not a lot of themselves, and kind of reneging copyrights as well in some situations and their intellectual property to support us in this research.
Could I add to that, just in terms of the Irish World Academy project, something I think that the artists really appreciated is that all the artists' contracts were co-designed and negotiated. So I know there was an original template shared with the artists, and I remember that there was one little part of it, and it was like in perpetuity, and they said no, and said no, okay, well, we'll be willing to do this for a period of time, and that was accepted by the project. And I completely agree with you. I think that a big motivation for artists is that they could see the educational value of this work, and all of these artists are artist scholars. They're involved in that area that Paul was talking about, artistic research. So I think they saw the value in contributing to that, but also appreciated that there was a recognition, a respect and understanding of rights and responsibilities in that space. And I think, Martin, part of what you bring to this as well is that kind of ethical framing from your own background here, which I think is something in how this work goes forward is going to be a really important part of it, because I think all of our conversations were marked between this kind of, like, on the one hand, that heady mix of creativity, and we could do this and we could do that, and then the real vulnerability of how you do that, who does that, who has the rights. And the fact that this was educational rather than primarily commercial was a really important aspect, I think, of how the project was agreed. So that just in terms of our own engagement here, yeah.
I'll just add a small point to that. So XTREME is unique in the sense that, you know, it is artists first. And Rui and Ray actually were very vocal in making that happen in terms of the contractual agreements with artists. And I was also very vocal in making sure that the artists were paid extremely well for their work. And we've done that too. So essentially we have a really lovely community of artists and creatives informing the work and development and research in XTREME. They definitely see this as an opportunity to see what the future is, and hopefully with our collective kind of research and collaboration to avoid some of the pitfalls that we're aware of. We don't want to make a new Spotify for mixed reality. We don't want to make a new Facebook for social engagement. We want to make something that is value-based, that speaks to our own personal and cultural, you know, values. So, and that's hard to do, but it is doable if we inform legal research and governance research and ethical research to help actually energize and drive this collaboration. And that's what we're doing. And we're trying to use this technology and innovation for good use cases, as Amanda spoke to.
Just a thought on this. I think we've drawn a little bit on some expertise from our robotics lab in this. It's a little surprising. Not about how to make a robot, but about how to reason about safety. Right? So the robots, in the robot lab, when you reason about safety, you reason at a distance. You don't touch the robot. Right? You think, probably I shouldn't stick my fingers there, and then you don't stick your fingers there. And we write a document that says, don't stick your fingers there. Probably I should create an exclusion zone around the robot. So you write that in a document. You write a document that says, do not hug the robot. And what we found in reality was when we started to do arts work with the robots, and we were working with dancers, dancers don't work at a distance. They don't reason at a distance. They reason with their bodies. They reason by touching the robot, pushing it, seeing how hard they can push it, seeing what it feels like to be hit by the robot. Yeah, they don't stick their finger in the joints. They're not idiots. They're brilliant. But they're brilliant with their bodies, and the way in which they engage with that technology is in this kind of somatic way. The reason I mentioned this is because what we're doing here with XTREME, in which we are creating experiences, we're working with creatives, means we're not reasoning at a distance about the ethical challenges and the social challenges and the legal challenges. We're actually doing it. Right? So we're asking the question, if we're going to create this mixed reality experience, how is that going to work? And we don't just reflect on how it might work, we actually do it. Right? So we do it in practice. And what that meant is that when we had the Capture event at Nottingham, there was an incredible enthusiasm in the air. There was an enthusiasm there because I think the performers understood that we were treating them as part of the project, as co-designers within the project of the whole process, including the ethical side. And that, for me, was really enthusing as a researcher.
Thanks. My question really, I suppose, is for Paul, and it's to do with the audience. You talked about the audience, mixed reality. And what I was wondering is, like, we're all sitting here in the audience, right? And I can see these 3 people here in front of me, and there's nobody here. And what I was wondering was, how in the mixed reality do we, as the audience, how do we know the other audience is there? Are they laid out? Is that the challenge, to create it like the way we're sitting here?
I think that's absolutely the challenge. So I think there's kind of 2 ways of thinking about an audience. You can think of an audience as a group of strangers, right? People that you are sitting in a room with, or you can think of an audience as the person that you came with, or the people that you came with to an experience, a bubble, right? When we go to a concert, there's a subset of people with whom we interact, and then a wider group of people who are present. Now, that wider group of people needs to be there to get the feeling of being at a concert. Right? Otherwise, you're at a private showing, and that's a slightly different thing. It's a different social experience. So the research question for us when it comes to audiences is, how do you have a mixture between that wider experience of being part of an audience and that local experience of consuming the thing with your friends, with the people that you want to be with your family? Now, we've tried various different approaches to this over the years, and with XTREME, at the moment we're focusing on kind of seeing a performance with the people you'd like to be with. And we've still got this kind of overarching challenge of how you represent all the other people who are watching it at the same time. Right? So there's a synchrony question here. Should you make performances that happen all at the same time all over the world? Right? So 7 p.m. on a Friday night, it's time for the Irish World Academy's performance. Right? You could do that, and that would help with that sense of togetherness, of it being a performance. Or you could say, I've downloaded this, and we're going to watch it as a family or as a friend group. And, you know, mum and dad in Australia are going to join us. And so it's not clear which of those is preferable for any given context. But what I think is important is, if you're going to be an audience in mixed reality, if you're going to give up the reality of being in the concert hall, I don't want someone with a giant hat sitting in front of me in my mixed reality performance. Right? So we've got to design so that you get the best seat in the house, and we've got to design so that everybody gets the best seat in the house. And that's a real challenge for making audiences.
Paul, could I add to that as well? Because I think an exciting part for us on the next stage of this project, and Martin mentioned other Academy colleagues who are involved in this, Hilary Moss and Kathleen Turner, and this links a lot, I think, Amanda, to your research and questions as well, is also moving beyond the space of thinking of a performance and an audience to what would it be like if this was a community? Or what would this be like in a clinical space? Or what would this be like if you're working with a particular cohort of people? And I think those are the kind of research questions that they'll be pursuing with this. So if it was a community music project, how would people be in the room? And what would people be doing? So I think that's going to be another interesting next phase of exactly that question that you raised there.
So unless there's any more questions, I think we'll finish up. It's a gorgeous day, and we want to enjoy the summer at last. So thank you for coming. It's been